The year is 1940. Northern France lies beneath a sky of smoke and ash. Villages burn dimly on the horizon. Roads choke with refugees, mothers pushing carts, children clutching blankets, horses collapsing under exhaustion. The German blitzkrieg has finally shown the world what lightning looks like when it wears steel. And now it is coming for Cassel. High on a hilltop rising above the plains of Flanders stands the old market town, narrow medieval streets, a church tower, stone houses built long before gunpowder. Today, they will become an outpost of no retreat. For surrounding this hill are the approaching divisions of the German 10th Army, corps, 6,000 men, armor, mortar, artillery, veterans of Poland, veterans of Belgium, soldiers driving forward with the confidence of a machine that believes it cannot be stopped. And standing in their path, barely 500 British infantrymen, the 2nd Battalion Gloucestershire Regiment, the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, a scattering of French troops, men pulled back from shattered lines, exhausted, dust-covered, running low on ammunition, throats dry from retreat, faces hollow from days without sleep, but unbroken. When news spreads that Cassel must hold, that it will be one of the outer bastions shielding the roads to Dunkirk, the officers do not shout. The men do not cheer. They simply nod, because they understand the truth. If Cassel falls too quickly, the corridor to Dunkirk collapses. And if it collapses, the British Expeditionary Force dies on the sands of the Channel. The Germans know it too. That is why they are coming with overwhelming force. Reports whisper of armored columns rolling closer, their engines a distant growl beneath the wind. Bauernfeind's troops sweeping in from the south. The 6th Panzer Regiment probing the western approaches. Infantry waves spreading like dark stains across the fields. Every number says Cassel is doomed. Every calculation says this is suicide. Every survivor who escapes to Dunkirk will later admit it. Cassel was never supposed to win. Cassel was supposed to buy time with blood. But on this hill stands a handful of men who refuse to see themselves as a sacrifice. Major General Harold Alexander, overseeing the rearguard positions across the Dunkirk perimeter, writes one simple directive: Cassel must hold, as long as humanly possible. It is a sentence that will become a death warrant, and a legend. Colonel Brett, commanding the Gloucesters, surveys the perimeter. He sees the broken walls, the lack of heavy weapons, the pitiful stores of ammunition. He sees the exhausted faces of his men. And yet, he also sees something else: determination, faith, a quiet steadiness in men who have been pushed back again and again, but have not bent. They do not know that over the next 2 days, they will face continuous assaults, artillery bombardments, armored probes, infantry waves, snipers hidden in farmhouses, smoke creeping through the streets like a living thing. They do not know that the Germans surrounding them are 6,000 strong, supported by tanks and experienced storm troops. They only know that they have orders. And more importantly, they have each other. On the evening of May 27th, as the sun sinks behind the ridges and the plains glow red with fire, the British dig in. Sandbags are stacked across crossroads. Bren guns are positioned at windows. Mortar teams set up in courtyards. The church tower becomes an observation post. Every narrow street becomes a potential killing ground. The men glance eastward, toward the smoke rising from Hasbrook, where another British battalion is being crushed. They glance southward, where the Germans are sweeping around like an encircling tide, and they understand Cassel is already surrounded. The townspeople, those who remain, watch in silence. They bring water. They bring bread. They whisper blessings. Some cross themselves. Some simply stare at the British uniforms with a mix of gratitude and fear. A corporal from the Gloucesters writes later, "It felt like the whole world had emptied, and only we remained. Night falls. The first shells land. The windows rattle. The stones tremble. And Cassel wakes to war. At first light on May 28th, German reconnaissance vehicles creep forward along the lower roads. Their engines echo against the cliffs. Machine guns chatter. Mortar arrive in arcs like burning comets. The British duck behind walls, return fire, pull back, reposition. The Germans keep coming, motorcycle troops probing one flank, infantry columns forming up on another, armored cars testing the barricades. The defenders can see the gray uniforms like a tide across the fields. 500 against 6,000. A British lieutenant watches through binoculars and mutters under his breath, "How the hell are we meant to stop that?" But Colonel Brett simply replies, "We hold." And so the impossible begins. The defenders brace their rifles. Bren gunners check their drums. Men steady themselves behind ancient stone walls. A runner arrives breathless with a message. Hold at all costs. A moment of silence. A shared nod. A deep breath. No retreat. No surrender. No way out. This is Cassel, a hilltop that must not fall. And as the German forces form up for their first full assault, the British tighten their grip on their weapons and whisper their final private prayers. Because they know one truth. They stand between an army and the sea. Dawn breaks on Cassel with a dull, copper light. Smoke veils the horizon. The plains lie silent for a heartbeat. And then the thunder begins again. Artillery. The German guns open up at 07:00. Shell after shell slams into the town. Roofs shatter. Chimneys collapse. Shards of brick and timber fly like shrapnel through the narrow streets. Dust clouds rise so thick the sun becomes a ghostly disk behind them. The men of the Gloucesters and the oxen bucks press themselves against walls, shield their faces with their arms, grit their teeth, and wait for the storm to pass. They have no heavy guns to answer with, only rifles. Bren guns. Mortar. Determination. Against impossible odds. They endure. Colonel Brett moves from post to post, coat dusted with rubble, encouraging each group in turn. He speaks softly, calmly, almost serenely, as if the fate of the Dunkirk corridor does not weigh upon his shoulders, as if 6,000 German troops are not closing in. His men draw strength from that call. Near the southern barricade, Captain Willis of the Ox and Bucks kneels beside a young private trembling from the bombardment. The boy can't be more than 19. Mud streaks across his cheeks. His hands shake as he clutches his rifle. Willis places a hand on his shoulder. "Courage isn't about not being afraid," he murmurs. "It's about standing anyway." The boy nods and steadies. In another street, a group of French soldiers, remnants of the 4th Division, share their last cigarettes with the British. They do not speak the same language, but they do not need to. The bond of men who know they may die together is older than any word. And all the while, the shelling continues. When it finally stops, the silence is almost painful. Too quiet. Too controlled. The Germans are preparing. From the ridge above the southern road, Sergeant Harry Dean peers through binoculars. What he sees makes his breath catch. Columns, infantry massing along the hedgerows, trucks unloading more troops, armored cars advancing in threes, mortar teams setting up behind the cover of farmhouses, smoke screens preparing to roll forward. He reports back. They're forming up for a full assault. The officers exchange grim looks. They knew this moment would come, but not so soon. Not with such numbers. Yet there is no hesitation. Orders are given. Positions are manned. Fields of fire are checked. Ammunition is counted and recounted because they all know they will not get more. The Germans begin their advance at 1,000 hours. Their infantry moves in disciplined lines, gray waves rolling across the green fields. Mortar drops smoke rounds that billow upward like pale ghosts. Armored cars race forward to probe the British defenses. From the rooftops, British observers mark targets. Range 200. A just left. Fire. Mortar answer. The first explosions tear into the German ranks. The battle begins. German rifle fire rattles across the barricades. Machine guns hammer the stone walls. Bren guns in upper windows spit fire in reply. Bolts click, shell cases tumble. Shouts echo from street to street. A German armored car pushes up the main road. Fast, aggressive, its machine gun spraying the upper stories. It slams into a barricade of wagons and sandbags, wheels spinning, engines screaming. A lone British corporal sprints forward with a boy's anti-tank rifle. He drops behind a cart, braces himself, and fires. The shot rings out like a crack of thunder. The armor-piercing round punches through the car's plating. Smoke pours out. German troops scramble from the hatch, only to be cut down by a Bren gun from above. One threat down, dozens more coming. The Germans shift tactics. Mortar begin to fall deeper into the town. Streets erupt. Walls collapse. The defenders are forced to pull back from exposed positions. But they pull back in good order. Slow, controlled, disciplined. The training holds. The courage holds. Yet behind every movement lies a bitter truth. They cannot replace the men they lose. The Germans can. As the fighting drags on, the suffering sharpens. A runner collapses from exhaustion. A medic drags a wounded man into the cover of a shattered doorway. A chaplain kneels beside the dying and whispers prayers drowned by gunfire. In the town square, Sergeant Dean's section holds its position under constant attack. The Germans probe the area again and again. Every time they are driven back. But each defense costs ammunition and blood. By afternoon, the defenders are weary ghosts. And still the Germans come. A captured report later reveals what the Germans believed, that Cassel was defended by a full brigade, that no small force could possibly inflict such punishment, that no 500 men could withstand their numbers. They did not know that each British soldier was fighting like a man defending the very passage home for thousands stranded behind him. They did not know that the French remnants in Cassel were veterans who refused to abandon their allies. They did not know that every ruined house became a fortress, every alleyway a trap, every window a firing port. Back on the German lines, officers watched through binoculars in growing frustration. Cassel should have fallen by noon. Instead, it stands defiant, smoke rising, rifles flashing, a thorn the size of a town embedded in the German advance. A junior officer mutters, "These English fight like demons." But Colonel Brett understands the truth. They are not demons. They are men driven by duty, by faith, by comradeship stronger than fear. As evening draws near, the German commanders escalate. More troops are committed. More armor, more mortar. The defenders brace themselves for another wave. Captain Willis gathers his platoon in a ruined barn. Night is coming, he tells them. They'll press hard. Hold your fire. Make every shot count. We'll get through this. A private asks quietly, "Sir, will Dunkirk hold?" Willis looks him in the eyes and does not lie. Only if we do. As darkness falls, the German bombardment resumes. It shakes the hill. It cracks the last unbroken windows. It sends tiles cascading from rooftops. But beneath the thunder, in the heart of Cassel, there is a steadiness, a resolve, a quiet, unshakable defiance. They do not know that tomorrow will be worse. They do not know that German armor will soon push deeper into the town. They do not know that by nightfall, they will be cut off from all other British forces. They only know one truth, against impossible odds. Cassel still stands. Night passes like a wounded animal crawling across the hill. Flares rise, shadows twist, fires burn in broken doorways. And all through the darkness, German machine guns chatter like iron teeth. By dawn on May 29th, Cassel is a ruin. The air tastes of brick dust and cordite. The streets are carpeted with shattered roof tiles. The church tower bears fresh holes from artillery shells. And still, the defenders stand their ground. But something has changed. A runner arrives at battalion headquarters, uniform torn, face pale. He hands Colonel Brett a message marked urgent. The colonel reads it once, then again, then folds it slowly. The order is clear. Break out. Attempt to reach Dunkirk. Destroy equipment. Do not allow capture. It is an order that confirms the battlefield truth. Cassel is now completely surrounded. The Germans have closed the ring. 6,000 men tightening around 500. Colonel Brett gathers his officers. There is no panic, no bitterness. Only the grim realization of what must be done. Cassel cannot be held any longer, but the breakout. That will be a battle unto itself. Before they can move, before they can slip through the German lines, they must first survive the morning attack. And it begins sooner than expected. At 0630, German armor rolls toward the southern barricade. 2 armored cars leading, followed by infantry in dense formation. Mortar drops smoke rounds to blind the defenders. Machine guns open up from hedgerows. The defenders answer with everything they have left. Bren guns sweep the streets. Rifles crack from second-story windows. A lone boy's anti-tank rifle fires again and again, its operator knocked backward each time by the recoil, but refusing to let go. The armored cars push through the smoke. Fast, aggressive, their machine guns roaring. A British sergeant shouts, "Hold your hold now." A volley erupts from the barricade. One armored car lurches, then stops. Smoke pours from its engine. The second pushes forward, only to slam into a hidden obstacle and flip onto its side with a metallic scream. The German infantry behind them hesitate, and in that heartbeat, the British strike. Grenades arc. Rifles thunder. A Bren gun sweeps the road like a scythe. The German advance falters, wavers, breaks. They pull back, shocked, confused. For the second day in a row, Cassel refuses to fall. But victory in these streets tastes of ash. For every German body lying silent, a British defender bleeds in a doorway or gasps for air beneath rubble. Medics move like ghosts from house to house. The wounded cry out. The dying whisper names of home. And still, the shelling intensifies. German artillery zeroes in on the town square. Explosions tear through positions that held through the night. Stone walls collapse. Fires ignite. Smoke swirls thick enough to erase entire streets. Cassel is being erased. Yet within that choking haze, acts of courage blaze bright. On the eastern approach, a platoon of the Ox and Bucks holds a narrow street barely wide enough for a cart. German infantry storm it again and again. The defenders fall back from one house, then take the next, and counterattack to retake the first. A British private, exhausted, wounded, almost delirious, pulls a wounded comrade to safety under fire, refusing to leave him, even as bullets kick up dust inches from his boots. Near the church, a group of French soldiers fight with fierce determination. Their lieutenant, wounded in the leg, orders his men to fix bayonets. When German infantry push into the courtyard, the French charge with a shout that echoes across the shattered stones. Every corner becomes a battlefield, every window an ambush, every doorway a last stand. And the Germans, frustrated, delayed, bloodied, begin to realize a chilling truth. Cassel is not being held by a brigade. It is being held by a few hundred men who refuse to surrender. German commanders commit more troops, more armor, more mortar, more machine guns. They believe sheer volume will break the defenders. But Cassel's defenders have something the Germans do not. They know this is their last stand on the hill. As noon approaches, the British prepare for the breakout. Ammunition is distributed, weapons checked. Wounded who cannot walk are tended, comforted, and left in the care of civilians. A decision that breaks hearts, but cannot be avoided. Colonel Brett gives his final instructions. Short, clear, steady. We move tonight. Break through their southern line. Stay together. No firing unless necessary. God be with you. The men nod. Some cross themselves. Some bow their heads. All understand the stakes. But fate has one more test. At 1500, German armor makes a final push, the largest yet. Half-tracks sweep toward the town. Machine guns rake the windows. Mortar explode in courtyards. Infantry advance in 3 columns, supported by armored cars. The defenders brace. The battle erupts like thunder. A Bren gunner in a second-story window fires until his barrel glows. When the Germans pinpoint his location and rake the building with fire, he does not pull back. He keeps firing until the floor collapses beneath him. A mortar team, down to their last few rounds, adjusts their aim and drops shells with pinpoint precision, halting a German column long enough for the infantry to regroup. Near the western barricade, a British lieutenant leads a countercharge of 15 men, all of them exhausted, all of them wounded in some way. They surge from behind rubble, bayonets fixed, roaring like men who refuse to die quietly. The Germans recoil, stunned by the ferocity. The counterattack buys minutes. Minutes become survival, but the cost is brutal. By late afternoon, Cassel is burning. The defenders are down to their final ammunition. Bodies lie in doorways, on stairwells, beside shattered vehicles. The once proud hilltop town is a husk of smoke and ruin. And yet the German advance slows, not because of lack of numbers, not because of lack of weapons, but because the defenders have made every step toward the town so costly that even veteran troops hesitate. They have delayed the enemy for 2 full days. They have held far longer than any commander dared hope. They have protected the Dunkirk corridor with their lives. And now night returns. The moment has come. Colonel Brett gathers what remains of the battalion. Barely 300 able to move, faces ash-covered, eyes hollow, helmets dented, uniforms torn, every man carrying wounds, some visible, most hidden. He gives a single nod. The breakout begins. Quiet steps through burning streets. Weapons clutched tight, the bed left behind. The wounded whispered farewells. A silent procession of ghosts slipping into the night. But the Germans are waiting. The breakout runs into machine gun fire. Mortar fall. Searchlights sweep the fields. German infantry shout commands in the darkness. The British push forward anyway. A platoon charges a machine gun nest, overruns it at bayonet point. A group of French soldiers hold a crossroads long enough for the column to pass. A wounded officer insists on fighting from a ditch, refusing to slow the others. Every minute is a battle, every meter a sacrifice. But slowly, painfully, the line moves. It is not victory. It is escape by blood. It is survival by inches. Behind them, Cassel burns like a funeral pyre for a regiment that gave everything. And ahead, faint, distant, is the hope of Dunkirk. They have endured the impossible. Now they must outrun it. But by dawn on the 30th of May, the Gloucesters, the Ox and Bucks, the French gunners, the Royal Signals, and all the battered survivors of Cassel were discovering the truth that had been creeping toward them all through the night. They had not broken through to Dunkirk. They had broken into a tightening German ring, a ring waiting for them. The breakout column already fragmented, exhausted, and fighting on instinct, realized it too late. First at Zeitpien, then at Bavinchov, and at every hedgerow lane that funneled desperate men into German crossfire. Those who still carried rifles fought. Those who did not still refused to surrender easily. Major Ricketts of the Gloucesters was among the officers captured early that morning. He had held Cassel with unshakable calm. Now, unarmed, bleeding, he still held dignity. Others attempted to slip through fields or crawl into ditches to reach Dunkirk. A handful did, but most could not. German armor was everywhere. Machine gun teams were placed on every approach road. The trap was total. And yet, even here, in the final collapse, the men behaved not like a broken rearguard, but like soldiers carrying out the last line of a final order. Hold the enemy as long as possible. They had done exactly that, and more. At about 11 a.m., the largest remaining group, led by Colonel Chris Vox of the Ox and Bucks, was surrounded near Watten. Vox walked forward alone. He told the German commander that his men had marched, fought, and bled through the night. They needed medical attention, and they would resist no further. The German officer, a veteran of World War I, saluted him. Even in victory, the enemy knew what this garrison had done. Of the roughly 3,000 troops who formed the castle perimeter, nearly 2,000 were captured. Many would spend 5 years as prisoners of war. The Gloucesters suffered especially heavy losses, dead, wounded, captured, but their stand had bought the BEF precisely what it needed. Time for columns to reach the Dunkirk beaches. Time for boats to withdraw them. Time for the lifeline of Operation Dynamo to hold just long enough. Many of the men saved at Dunkirk never knew who fought for them at Cassel, never knew the names of the battalions that stayed behind so they could leave. But history remembers, and so do we. The stand at Cassel was not a battle fought for victory. It was a battle fought so that others might survive. A battalion, a brigade, a handful of mixed units, facing armor, artillery, aircraft, and an enemy 10 times their number, chose not to fall back, not to break, not to bargain for a safer position. They held until the night turned to fire. They held until the ground was shaking beneath them. They held until every avenue was cut off, and every escape choked out. And only then, only when there was no more delaying to be done, did they attempt to break through. Cassel was, and remains, one of the great rearguard actions in British military history. A place where courage did not save the men who offered it, but saved thousands of others instead. So when we speak of Dunkirk, of the miracle of the rescue, of the armada that crossed the Channel, and brought a nation back from the edge, we must also speak of Cassel, where the Gloucesters, the Ox and Bucks, the French artillerists, and every last soldier on that hill stood in the path of an army so that another army could live to fight again. Cassel was not a triumph. It was a sacrifice, a deliberate one, a necessary one, a heroic one. And because they made it, Britain endured. That is the legacy of the men who held Cassel.